What's a woman like you doing with ink like that? What's your real MOS, sweetheart? Admin or supply? Rear Admiral Davis Strickland practically announced it to the entire room, staring at the tattoo on Captain Ava Rourke's forearm like it was some quirky style choice rather than what it actually marked: the kill tally of the most lethal female sniper the U.S. military has ever seen. 300 confirmed eliminations over 4 brutal deployments, etched into a coded design only the special operations world understands. Fort Horizon's conference room went silent when she pushed her sleeve up all the way, and a Delta operator in the back breathed one word that flipped the atmosphere: Phantom. Strickland had no clue that the pattern on her arm represented more enemy kills than his whole SEAL unit managed in 3 long years. He didn't know about the hide in Ramadi, where she held a broken collarbone together for 41 hours, just to make one shot that neutralized the highest value target in the region. And when 200 operators snapped to attention for a captain they'd never seen before, the Admiral finally realized he'd casually dismissed someone whose classified record made his own silver star look like a participation ribbon. Late-day sunlight hit Fort Horizon's Special Operations compound, turning the Texas dust into something like burnished bronze. Captain Ava Rourke, Army infantry officer, Ranger qualified, senior instructor at the Marksmanship Center of Excellence, waited outside the Joint Operations Integration Facility, watching a mix of Rangers, Green Berets, Delta, and SEALs heading into the auditorium for the quarterly Precision Strike Symposium. She was 31, 5'9", built like someone who puts in 20 miles a week and can keep a rifle absolutely steady for hours. Her dark blonde hair was tightened to regulation, and her steel-gray eyes carried the flat focus of someone who'd stared through scopes at men who were very much alive, until she pulled the trigger. Beside her stood Lieutenant Colonel Morgan Hale, a former Delta operator with 23 years of service and a face that looked like gravity and explosions had negotiated over which parts to keep. He was the one who pulled strings to get her into this instructor role after her last rotation, fighting the old-school crowd who swore women teaching special operations shooters sent the wrong message. He studied her stance now, weight even, gaze-tracking motion without locking onto anything, every muscle ready. The building smelled like coffee, gun oil, and the determination of operators who constantly push past what most humans can take. Ava had spent 11 months here, teaching advanced marksmanship to students who walked in convinced they already knew everything important about precision shooting. Most were polite enough, but there was always that faint vibe, like they tolerated her instead of respected her. Her public service record showed 4 years in infantry, Ranger school grad, class 40217, Sniper School distinguished graduate, 4 combat tours, Bronze Star with Valor, 2 Purple Hearts. What it conveniently hid was 3 years embedded with a joint Special Operations Task Force running counter-sniper operations in Mosul, Ramadi, and Fallujah. Missions that made her a whispered legend and a classified file. Stories of warriors like her come from everywhere. Tiny towns where everyone knows your name. Massive cities where no one does. Suburbs just like wherever you're sitting right now. And if you want more of the ones who never get headlines, you're in the right place. Major Tom's Tales. If you want to hear more about the warriors who never end up in flashy headlines, go ahead and follow Major Tom's Tales. Lieutenant Colonel Morgan Hale brushed his fingers against Ava's elbow, a small cue that meant eyes forward. Inside the auditorium, Rear Adam Davis Strickland was marching toward the podium in his perfectly pressed service dress blues, chest covered in 26 years of medals and achievements, wearing a look that said he was ready to enlighten everyone who dared think differently. Ava Rourke learned patience long before the Army ever knew her name, back when she was 12 in the open prairie of eastern Montana. Her grandfather, Lucas Rourke, taught her to hunt mule deer across such endless space that firing too soon meant chasing wounded animals for miles through land unforgiving enough to kill the careless. Lucas had fought as a designated marksman with the 1st Marine Division at Chosin Reservoir during the Korean War, surviving cold so brutal it froze rifles solid and enemy waves so relentless they tried to smother Marines through sheer numbers. He passed down the lesson that had kept him alive. Marksmanship wasn't about muscle or speed. It was about breath, patience, and understanding that the hardest part isn't firing the shot. It's waiting for the moment when you must. The Army had never been her first plan. She intended to follow Lucas into the Marines until a sharp West Point recruiter pointed out the truth. The Army was opening infantry roles to women in 2016 while the Marines were still dragging their feet. So she chose the harder road. Graduated in 2018, volunteered for Ranger School while many female officers stuck with safer branches like logistics. She finished despite dropping 14 pounds she didn't have to lose and breaking her left hand in the mountains. Then Sniper School, where she outshot 31 male candidates and left as distinguished graduate, even though some instructors quietly acted like she was just part of a social experiment. Jae-suk noticed her during her second deployment to Iraq. Ava was providing overwatch for a regular infantry patrol in Mosul when a Delta team got pinned by an ISIS sniper hidden 300 meters out. She found the angle, made her calculations in under half a minute, and punched around through an 8-inch window gap, threat neutralized. The Jae-suk commander watched through a drone feed and had her reassigned within 2 days. The ghost she carried from those missions had a name: Staff Sergeant Marco Reyes. He'd been her spotter on their 23rd operation in Ramadi. They were providing cover for a sensitive site exploitation when a second sniper, one that slipped past recon, fired from a high perch they'd marked as safe. Marco shifted position to clear her view at the exact second that round found him. She dropped the enemy shooter 6 seconds later with an 870-meter shot. But Marco bled out before help arrived, staring at her like he still couldn't understand that he was the one hit. Jae-suk kept her in theater another 14 months after that. 68 more high-value eliminations. Intelligence briefers told her those kills saved American lives. She accepted the logic, but she also knew Marco died because her focus had been 3 seconds off, and no success metric would ever even that score. Now she trained sharpshooters who had never watched a teammate die through glass and crosshairs. And every time she lectured on sector discipline and threat scanning, she remembered Marco and the promise she made at his graveside that her students would not repeat the mistake that cost him everything. Rear ADM. Strickland, 54, career SEAL, had earned his reputation during the Iraq surge and turned it into rank through equal parts real combat experience and political instincts. 6'1", radiating the confidence of someone who'd never been proven wrong on anything he cared about. Deputy Commander for Special Operations Command Joint Task Force, and the embodiment of the mindset Ava had been fighting her entire career. Strickland had come to Fort Horizon to lecture on joint interoperability, and he'd made it very clear, wrapped in polished professional language, that putting women in combat roles was, in his mind, a political stunt that weakened real battlefield capability. 2 hours into the symposium, his eyes finally landed on Ava sitting with the instructor group. While he spoke, he dropped pointed remarks about how precision shooters needed the right physical qualities, how standards must never bend to suit demographics, and how the military existed to eliminate threats, not participate in social experiments. He glanced toward the instructors as he said it, letting his stare rest on Ava just long enough that the entire room caught the message. During the break, he walked straight over to her with 2 of his SEAL staff officers in tow, the kind of men who strutted like they owned every building they entered. He asked about her instructor role, her combat resume, whether she'd actually been in the fight or mostly supported it from the sidelines. Polite phrasing, insulting implication. In his mind, she was a quota, not a warrior. Then he noticed the tattoo on her forearm, the geometric pattern that looked decorative unless you knew its meaning, and he fired off that condescending sweetheart line about her emos. The officers nearby shifted awkwardly. His two SEALs smirked like this was the brand of leadership they expected from a flag officer. Ava kept still, expression calm, those steel-gray eyes quietly recording everything while giving away nothing. She'd encountered men like Strickland before, men whose experience made them influential, whose confidence made them careless, and whose bias dressed itself up as concern about standards. Captain Ethan Ward, a Special Forces instructor who'd been at Fort Horizon for 8 months, caught the exchange. He stepped forward and casually suggested the Admiral might appreciate a live demonstration of what the Marksmanship Center's training could produce. Strickland agreed with the polite smirk of a man entertaining flawed suggestions. That's when Lieutenant Colder Morgan Hale appeared, rank glinting under the overhead lights, expression tight, the look someone gets right before a superior realizes they've seriously miscalculated. He asked Ava a single question. Would she be willing to show the assembled operators exactly what she could do? She responded by slowly rolling up her sleeve. Later, that night, Ava sat alone in her quarters, a plain senior officer room that smelled like old carpet and the memories of everyone who'd slept there before her, staring at a photograph on her nightstand. Marco Reyes, outside a safe house in Ramadi, both of them covered in dust, geared up, and smiling despite having been awake 50 hours into a 72-hour mission. She remembered the warmth of his arm around her shoulders, his voice calling wind corrections with total confidence, and the absolute trust he had in her, even when most teams would have aborted in those conditions. Her hands were steady. They always were. That was the entire purpose of thousands of hours behind a rifle. But her chest felt tight. The restrained fury of getting through a whole day without dropping Strickland after he'd reduced years of life-or-death operations to some kind of clerical assignment. She ran her fingertips across the shapes tattooed into her skin, designs that seemed random unless you understood the code. Each diamond stood for 10 confirmed eliminations, a quiet language that marked every life she'd taken so others could live. Each circle on Ava's tattoo stood for 5 confirmed kills, laid out in a sequence only those who'd served in the task force community could decode. 308 eliminations across 4 deployments, more than any woman in U.S. history and ranking her in the top 15 snipers of all time, despite being smaller, lighter, and repeatedly told women weren't built for this kind of job. Then the memory struck hard, Marco collapsing right beside her in that Ramadi hide. The crack of the incoming round, the jolt of impact, the look in his eyes, first shock, then confusion, while she racked the bolt and located the enemy shooter who'd taken him. She made the shot 870 meters through brutal heat shimmer. But it didn't matter. Marco was bleeding out from wounds even the best combat medics couldn't fix, and the evacuation was 9 minutes away when he needed it in 3. She forced herself to breathe the way her grandfather taught her. Slow diaphragm control to keep the heart steady. Strickland symbolized the exact mindset she'd been punching holes through since Ranger School, the belief that capability could be judged by appearance, that respect required fitting into a specific mold, that women in direct combat were just political experiments rather than fighters who earned their place with blood and performance. Tomorrow would test him. She felt it the same way she instinctively calculated wind calls and dope charts. Men like Strickland rarely backed down, because admitting they were wrong threatened the foundation of their worldview, and flag officers don't climb that high by questioning themselves publicly. For Marco, she thought, touching his picture before switching off the light. For every warrior who had to learn fatal lessons firsthand. For every student she was shaping so they would not repeat the mistake that cost her partner his life. The next morning arrived with clear blue skies and heat radiating off the 1,000-meter range like a mirage. Lieutenant Colonel Morgan Hale had arranged a live fire demonstration at Range 37, the same precision course used for sniper school qualification. Word spread overnight, and by 0830 more than 200 personnel filled the observation line. Rangers, Green Berets, Delta, SEALs, Air Force Special Tactics, plus instructors and field-grade leaders who sensed something important was coming. Strickland stood out front with his staff, wearing that mix of polite skepticism and quiet certainty, the posture of a man who expected the day to validate his opinions. Hale clarified that this wasn't an official test, just a showcase of what Fort Horizon's marksmanship program was producing, with Captain Ava Rourke as the example. The course of fire was standard, just heavily compressed. 8 targets between 500 and 1,000 meters, shifting conditions and only 2 minutes to hit them all. It simulated real operations, multiple threats, varied distances, zero forgiveness. Most qualified snipers required 12 minutes to run that course with passing accuracy. 2 minutes forced stress that revealed cracks. Ava dropped behind the M2010 enhanced sniper rifle, chambered in 300 Win Mag, the Army's top precision system. She slid into prone position, cheek welded to the stock, her breathing settling into the trained rhythm that synced with her pulse like muscle memory. The range went hot. First target, 500 meters, zero wind. She ranged, confirmed, squeezed. Center mass hit. 6 seconds gone. Second, 650 meters, slight crosswind. Quick correction, another clean impact. 14 seconds total. Targets 3 through 6 rolled out, 700, 800, 900, 950 meters, each demanding a new equation of wind, elevation, temperature. She dropped them all with that machine-like efficiency earned through years of muscle memory. 83 seconds on the clock. Target 7 was the separator, 1,000 meters, moving laterally at a slow walk while gusts played havoc with the flight path. This was where you found out who just practiced and who could actually perform in chaos. She tracked the movement, anticipated the gust cycle, led appropriately, and followed through. 2 seconds of flight time, long enough that the whole crowd felt the suspense before the steel snapped. Center mass. 1 minute, 47 seconds elapsed. Silence rippled across the line. The last target brought the real pressure. Strickland himself called in the add-on, 800 meters, partial exposure, hostage scenario. Only an 8-inch slice of target visible, a no-shoot figure right beside it. One mistake, and you hit the wrong person. She locked on, checked her zero, slowed her breathing until she could no longer feel her pulse, and fired. Clean shot straight through the exposed zone. Total time, 1 minute, 56 seconds. 8 targets, 8 impacts, 0 misses. On a course most couldn't finish in 12 minutes. Then Strickland asked for one more trial. A cold-bore shot with a different rifle at an unknown distance. Lieutenant Hale looked her way, her choice. She thought of Marco Reyes, of that 6-second reaction shot after he fell, of the 308 times she'd had to be flawless so someone else lived. She nodded and moved to another firing point, settling behind an M24 she'd never touched before. Old platform, still in rotation. Range officer called out 750 meters. Full exposure, no prep time. She loaded 1 round, scanned through her mental checklist, estimate distance, measure wind, adjust elevation, confirm parallax. Then she exhaled until the weapon felt fused to her bones and sent the round. Center mass. The observation line erupted. Voices overlapping. Demands for her score sheets. Disbelief racing through the crowd. Rear, Adm. Strickland didn't move. His face frozen in the realization that his assumptions had just been obliterated by fact. Hale called Ava forward and asked her to show everyone the story written on her skin. She faced the 200 operators and lifted her sleeve high, revealing the entire coded pattern running her forearm. To most eyes, it looked like edgy art, but to those who understood, it was a memorial, a record, written in a language where no translation is required. Each diamond marks 10 confirmed kills, Lieutenant Coldred Hale told the hushed formation. Each circle marks 5. Captain Rourke has 308 confirmed eliminations across 4 combat deployments with a joint Special Operations Task Force conducting counter-sniper missions in Mosul, Ramadi, and Fallujah. She holds the record for the most confirmed kills by a female sniper in U.S. military history. The reaction ripple was immediate. Ava saw it spread across the operators, wide-eyed shock from the newer guys, a flash of recognition from those who'd heard rumors of a phantom sniper with unbelievable numbers, and that sudden recalculation from senior leaders who realized they'd completely misjudged the woman standing right in front of them. Strickland's face shifted from stunned to something uglier, humiliation boiling with anger, the awareness that he had just belittled one of the deadliest precision shooters to ever wear the uniform. Hale continued, voice steady. Major Rourke holds 2 Purple Hearts, a Bronze Star with Valor, and a classified unit citation for operations that remain sealed. She spent 3 years with our task force targeting high-value threats in urban terrain where conventional forces couldn't move. That's when Sergeant Maj Jonas Carter, a Delta veteran with 4 deployments and skin like sun-cured leather, stepped out. He stated plainly that he'd served with Ava during her 3rd rotation and credited her overwatch for identifying an enemy assault element that no one else had spotted, dropping 3 fighters before they could spring an ambush on his team. 2 more JSOC operators spoke up, confirming missions they couldn't discuss in detail, but every word contradicted Strickland's claims about physical limits and lowered standards. Their reputations left no room for doubt. Every argument Strickland had made, dismantled in minutes by performance and testimony from warriors whose credibility was beyond question. His soapbox had just been kicked out from under him by cold, undeniable skill. Then came the real hammer. Captain Rourke will be promoted to Major next month, Hale announced. She'll assume the role of Deputy Commandant for Advanced Marksmanship, the youngest officer in 15 years to hold that position. Strickland didn't speak. There was nothing worth saying. He had arrived at Fort Horizon expecting to prove a point about standards, and instead discovered he was the one who needed educating about what capability actually looks like. As the crowd started to break apart, dozens of students swarmed Ava, firing off questions, asking for advice, trying to learn anything they could from someone who'd earned every inch of her expertise in places where mistakes are fatal. Strickland walked off with his staff, never glancing back. His once impressive dress blues looked a whole lot smaller than they had just 2 hours earlier. 5 weeks later, every Special Operations unit on base showed up for the promotion ceremony at Fort Horizon. Major Ava Rourke stood tall as Lieutenant Cole Hale pinned the oak leaves to her uniform. The moment she was no longer the instructor people doubted, but the one the institution itself acknowledged as elite. She didn't waste a single day. As Deputy Commandant, she pulled in instructors who'd operated under fire, rebuilt scenarios to mirror real-world chaos, and pushed training into the uncomfortable places where mistakes reveal themselves. She drilled into her shooters that precision wasn't just about squeezing triggers, It was about making the right call when the price of failure was someone's life. But the real shift wasn't just curriculum, it was symbolic. Across SOF units and even into the broader Army, her story spread. A female sniper with 308 kills dismissed by a flag officer, who answered not with words, but with performance that destroyed his argument. Young women saw proof that merit still mattered. Skeptical men began to rethink their assumptions. Leaders who resisted integration suddenly had a living example they couldn't ignore. 4 months after the demonstration, Ava received a short, carefully crafted letter from Rear ADM, Strickland. He admitted his earlier comments came from incomplete understanding, acknowledged that her combat record demanded respect, and expressed hope that her work would continue producing warriors of her caliber. She read it once, then filed it away without replying. On a quiet Sunday, she drove to Arlington and knelt beside Marco Reyes's headstone, running her fingertips over his name as sunlight cut through the oak trees. She told him about the training changes, how new shooters were learning the hard lessons he'd helped teach her, how fewer operators would die because of what he sacrificed. His loss hadn't been pointless. Everything she built, every improvement she made, rested on what he taught her about being not only a precise shooter, but a better human being. She stayed until the sun stood high, then walked back to her car, steady, ready for whatever waited next, carrying Marco's memory forward into a future where capability spoke louder than appearance, and warriors were judged by what they could do, not by how they looked doing it.